Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Saturday Conversation. I'm Bobby Burton, joined by Rod Babers and CJ Vogel. This episode of On Texas Football brought to you by the folks at MyBookie. Make sure you're in the game with MyBookie at mybookie.ag. Rod and CJ, Longhorns have the Kentucky Wildcats in Austin. It's the furthest west the Kentucky program has ever played a college football game. I still can't believe that we're talking about that. It just blows my mind. That being said, this is a Kentucky team that has struggled on offense, has been reasonably good on defense at times, especially when they're healthy, and it looks like they're healthy again coming into this game. They had a bunch of people sit out against Murray State last week to kind of get them healthy for these last two games of the year. What do you think, CJ? I'm going to go to you right now about this struggling Kentucky offense and what they can do against a really good Texas defense.
Yeah, that's going to be the big question, right? What can Kentucky do on offense against this Texas defense? We know that Texas is the number one passing defense in all the country, and that maybe doesn't change a whole lot for Kentucky, right? They've always kind of been a ground and pound team. They haven't had much success offensively of sustaining drives, yet they're still 35th in time of possession, right? They average 12 more rush attempts than they do pass attempts, which tells me you're going to see a heavy dose of Kentucky's ground game, which has kind of been the blueprint for a lot of opponents this year to move the rock against the Texas defense. So that'll be interesting, but you can't totally disregard Kentucky through the air, and for good reason, right? They have three wide receivers that I think are actually pretty talented, right? Dane Key, their number one wide receiver this year, about 880 yards receiving. Then Berrien Brown, who was an all SEC return man a year ago, one of the fastest, most dynamic players in all the country. And Jay Macklin, coming over from North Texas, was a 1,000-yard receiver a year ago. They got some weapons on the outside, but will there be time to throw the ball for Brock Vandagriff? And will there be separation down the field? It'll be a good test to go off of what should be a pretty, running attack, I would say.
Rod, what do you think about the Kentucky defense? It's obviously the strength of their team, holding Ole Miss to below 20 points, holding Georgia below 20 points. Clearly, it's also a Mark Stoops-led team. We know the Stoops family is known for defense.
Yep.
What do you see about the Texas offense against this Kentucky defense?
I think, this Kentucky defense will come out with a good game plan. I really do. I mean, you just mentioned those games. This defense allows them to suck teams into playing an ugly brand of football because they like to muck it up. And they have NFL caliber players at every level of the defense. Talked about Deion Walker, the fantastic defensive tackle. He projects to be a first or a second round pick. Dumas Johnson, the linebacker, was a transfer from Georgia. I really like him. He's highly productive inside. They add him as a added kind of value contributor in the pass rush too. I think he's got 3.5 sacks on the season. He's a good player. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it's just my theory, that you'll get Maxwell Hairston back, the corner for them, who's an NFL caliber corner. He had missed a lot of the season due to a shoulder injury, but I believe he's going to end up coming back for this game versus Texas. That's going to give them their best coverage defender back in this game against a deep wide receiving core and a very prolific passing game. So they can defensively. They can cause you to hit some snags offensively. And I think against Texas, you got to be wary that also Mark Stoops will break out some of that 3 high that Arkansas played. I know it's not necessarily something they major in, but when you play against a team like Texas and you saw them struggle versus a team like Arkansas, who had been struggling on defense because they use a specific concept that they had success in, I expect, just like any football team, I expect Kentucky to use some of those same concepts. So I expect to see the 3 high today.
I do too. I got to ask you guys this: keys to victory for Texas. Is it getting ahead of the chains on first down for the offense and keeping Kentucky behind the chains so they actually have to go to the air and Texas can test that Kentucky offensive line that's had issues this season? Is first down maybe the key to this game at some level for you guys? Because it could decide or dictate how the other team has to approach the rest of the game. I mean, what do y'all think of that as an idea? CJ?
First down is big, but to me, it's the first quarter. And that's something I think Texas, first downs dictate drives. First quarters dictates the entire game for me. And so that's where I'm leaning. Texas hasn't had great first quarter starts in recent SEC matchups offensively. Kentucky hasn't allowed 2 drives to score and end up points in all of the SEC play this year. They're 15th in the country in first quarter points allowed defensively. So they come ready to play. They kind of enact on their game plan that they brought into the game. To me, Texas has to get out early and start on top. If you let Kentucky stick around, this has kind of been the blueprint for a number of teams, Mississippi State, Arkansas, Vanderbilt. If you let them stick around and play to their game plan, it's going to muddy up the water. It's going to be an uglier game than you anticipate. And that's a big reason why I'm kind of hoping that Texas relies on its defense to start, right? It sounds crazy, but they've not been able to, reap the rewards of getting the ball first. So let the defense maybe get a turnover, flip the field, whatever it might be, and then go score, get on top. And that's how I think you're able to generate some early success in a lead that Kentucky will have to throw on to get up and catch up with.
Hey, Rod, what about you? What do you think the key to the game is?
I think that's a great one by CJ, though, because just to add to it, Sark knows that as well, CJ. I think that's why that Florida game a couple of weeks ago, we got him going for it on 4th and 1 on his own 24 in the first quarter on the second drive of the game, because he knows a bad start, slow start for Texas equals an ugly game, usually for the Texas offense. And you don't want to play an ugly game against a team like Kentucky. That's exactly what they want to do and muck it up. So I agree with you. Great point there. I'll go with takeaways. I'll go with takeaways and turnovers, man. Always is, right? The great equalizer in matchups. But Texas has 22 takeaways on the season as a defense. Only 5 teams in college football have more takeaways than Texas. If I'm not mistaken, Vandergrift, the quarterback for Kentucky, 7 interceptions, 2 fumbles also lost on the season. So as many turnovers and giveaways as he has touchdowns. I think the Texas pass rush will be able to put a lot of pressure on them when they decide to throw the football. And I'm hoping that Texas will get off to a big lead early, or at least a sizable lead early, put them in some predictable passing situations so they can play that nasty dime, that NASCAR dime. Guys, they had 6 sacks last game against Arkansas. Half of them came in that nasty NASCAR dime package. They're starting to play it a little bit more liberally. It used to be just 3rd and longs, and it used to be like just 2-minute situations, end of halves. I think I saw it on a 2nd down. They can get you in 2nd and really long. They'll throw that NASCAR dime out there. So anyway, that's my favorite package, but I think I'm going off takeaways. I think takeaways are going to be big in this game if Texas can keep up their opportunistic ways.
Takeaways and no giveaways.
No giveaway. Turnover margin. There you go.
You cannot give a Kentucky team that struggles to move the football free points. You just can't do it. So there's only been one team this year that's really forced that from Texas, and that has been Georgia. No other defense has really been able to do that against Texas, in my opinion. So the Longhorns have to be aware of that. All right, let's talk about our predictions for the game. Line by my bookie, guys, right now, 20.5 points. Boy, that seems heavy. 46.5 point over under. I want to get your guys' opinions of what your score predictions. Rod, let's start with you, buddy.
That's a big line. That is a big line. This is good. I got a lot of respect for this defense, man. After I've watched them, man, they keep it close. They did it with Georgia. They kept it close. They beat Ole Miss. Kept it close with Tennessee. People look at that 10-point win and think, oh, man, they must have had control of that game. Hell, man, they were leading that game. Actually, Kentucky was leading that game in the second half. I'm going to go, do I think the offense is going to get into the 30s at home? All right, let's go with 30. I'm going to go with 30 on the dot. 30. At 30. Let's go. A lot of trust in the Texas defense. This offense is going to struggle. I'll go with 30 to, how about 30 to 13? There you go. 30-13. That feels right for me. 30-13.
That's not too far off from the line.
No, it's not.
That or the over-under. The over-under, by the way, 46.5. CJ, what do you have, buddy?
Yeah, we had to recalibrate a little bit after last week. We shot way too high. We had to get the algorithm back in charge. I don't know how Texas is going to get to it, but 25-7 is what the algorithm spit out. That's what I'm rocking with this week. 25 is an uncommon number in the world of football, especially down here in college football. But 25-7 at home, I love the under. I think this is, to your point, Rod, about respecting this Kentucky defense. I think it's the most underrated side of a ball in all the SEC, and it shouldn't be, right? That's kind of been their MO for multiple years now, on top of a good running game. 25-7.
Wow, this is going to be a rare one where all three of us are on the same side of both the point spread and the under. So none of us took Texas and the points or the over.
Which means it's surely going to be a 40-point win for Texas, right?
That's exactly what it means, CJ. You know that as well as I do. I'm glad that even though you're young, you're learning. Hey, I went. This is interesting because CJ said he went with an unconventional score. My score was also unconventional. I went 19-9. I just have a feeling there might be a safety in this game from the Longhorns. I mean, so Texas scores 17 points on offense, maybe gets Kentucky backed up on their own offense, something like that. And I don't look. Kentucky not very good in the red zone. They don't have a quarterback that can really do it. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe Vandegrift's legs play a role here because he's not a horrible runner. He has some athleticism to him. He doesn't seem to have any timing as it relates to his run game when I watch them play. So look, long story short, Rod B 30-13, CJ 25-7. I'm going to go 19-9. And we will talk about this next Saturday if we're all wrong, by the way. Florida, I will say this. You mentioned the quality start, CJ, and that issue, and only no team in the SEC has actually scored more than once against Kentucky to start a game. They're the best in the league at that. Basically, the only two blowout losses they've had this year are to South Carolina and Florida.
Yeah.
Let's see what that means. I mean, the Florida game was on the road. South Carolina is just hard to understand how they got blown out that badly, but we'll see what happens. Hopefully Texas does cover and the over happens, and then we'd all be happy. But that's at least our prediction. All right, the rest of the SEC, let's get to that if you don't mind. But first, I want to say thank you to our sponsor. With all the excitement of this season, make sure you're in the game with MyBookie. Bet any matchup, hundreds of college player props, and take advantage of weekly risk-free bets. The best part is you can do it all, anytime, anywhere, straight from your phone. Visit mybookie.ag and use promo code ONTexas to get started. It's MyBookie's 10th year anniversary, and they're rolling out the red carpet for bettors. Bet big and bet confidently with risk-free Thursdays. If your boosted bet doesn't hit, you'll get your money back. Weekly no-sweat, win-win bets all season long. And sign up now using the code ONTexas to cash in on a double deposit bonus. It's a no-brainer. Double the cash in your account before you even place your first bet. But don't wait, because it's only available for a limited time. And for those of you who've been playing MyBookie for a while, they've got something for you too. A new loyalty rewards program in MyBookie Plus. It's simple. The more you play, the more you earn. And as you progress through the tiers, unlock exclusive promotions, epic giveaways, and cash back in your account. This episode of On Texas Football brought to you by MyBookie. Make sure you're in the game with MyBookie. All right, next game we want to talk about, guys. Florida, Ole Miss, Alabama, Oklahoma, A&M, Auburn. I'm going to let you guys choose which one we go to next, because all three of those are interesting for a variety of reasons. Florida has a bunch of recruits on campus that Texas is monitoring. Alabama, Oklahoma. That is Oklahoma's last chance, really, to become bowl eligible. A&M, Auburn. The Aggies going to Auburn, and it's a night game there at Jordan-Hare. Which one y'all want to go first? CJ, you're the youngest. You get to go. You get to roll the dice first, buddy.
Let's start with the one that kicks off in a few minutes, Bobby. That Ole Miss and Florida. I think that's an interesting game. You mentioned a lot of recruits in the state of Florida. Florida's trying to keep them home. They'll be at that game. I don't know if Texas necessarily wants to play Ole Miss in the college football playoff, but this is absolutely a game you should be rooting for Ole Miss for, in the sense that you would like to see another one of those big beatdowns put on by the Rebels against an SEC opponent. Will they? I think that's a big question. But that passing attack vertically down the field. If it's anything similar to what Texas was able to do against Florida, they'll have success down the field. But we'll see what kind of magic DJ Lagway puts on against this Ole Miss front. Of course, I think he'll be under pressure a lot. But, hey, Lagway's been impressive this year, and that's kind of the pitch right now to a lot of these recruits. Stay home, come play with a really talented ascending quarterback in college football. That's the pitch from Billy Napier, who got the vote of confidence from his AD 2 weeks ago. So we'll see just what that overall pitch is. But I think Ole Miss and Texas fans kind of need to link up and say, hey, put on a beat down, because that's going to help us a lot in recruiting.
Ole Miss, according to the line at my bookie, favored by 10, the over 55.5. What do you think, Rod? You think Ole Miss or Florida in this one?
I think it depends on, I think there's going to be, a lot of pressure on Lagway. Ole Miss's front, man, they really get after the opposing quarterback. I want to say they actually lead the country in pressures. They actually do. They got 216 pressures, tied for the most in the country. They get after the quarterback, but DJ Lagway, if anybody can escape the pressure and making plays in the scramble drill, it would be Lagway. I think Ole Miss's pressure gets to him, though, forces him. I think he makes some plays, but I think they force him into making a couple of mistakes, and those mistakes come back to haunt him. I'll take Ole Miss, but I think Lagway can make it interesting. This Florida team believes when he's in.
Yeah,
they believe when he's there. That's why if Texas would have played him with Lagway, as a healthier Lagway, it would have been a little bit a more competitive game. I think Texas still would have won, but this team plays differently when Lagway is the starting quarterback. There's no question about it.
I completely agree. He's got a little it factor to him.
Yep.
I completely, you can tell the hair raises up on the back of people's necks because they think a big play is just can happen at any time. He throws a beautiful deep ball, Rod.
Oh, it's nice.
And they've got some guys that can run. Even the backups at Florida can run really well, and they run that post. And Lagway made a key play last weekend against LSU where he stepped up into the pocket as well. So he's growing a little bit as a quarterback, and I think that matters. That being said, if Ole Miss, loses this game, they're out of the college football playoffs.
You're right.
That'll be 3 losses, 3 in conference issues. They've got to win this, and if Lane Kiffin is ever going to get to the college football playoff, this is the team to do it for him.
Yes.
And so he better leave everything out there. I think Ole Miss goes into Gainesville and wins this game. The question is it going to be a blowout or is it going to be tight? And if it's tight and Florida starts to believe, like Rod talked about, in their quarterback, watch out. That's the one, like CJ said, starts here in a little bit, 11 a.m. on ABC. Texas game, by the way, follows immediately after on ABC at 2:30. All right, let's go to Oklahoma, Alabama next, guys, if y'all don't mind. Alabama going to Oklahoma. Look, Alabama is somewhat of a I want to say this the right way. They feel very one-sided on offense. Like if you stop the Jalen Milroe run game, maybe you have a chance to stop them in the pass game. Okay. I know Jalen Milroe's improved, and he's got Ryan Williams on the outside doing that with him. But does OU stand any chance in this? According to my bookie, they're favored. Alabama favored by 13.5 in Norman.
Oh.
I mean, this is not a great situation for OU. But what do you think? This is the game that follows Texas, by the way, on ABC at 6:30. CJ?
Well, I think it's first and foremost, it's pretty interesting, right? We need to mention Michael Fasusi, who will be in Austin to watch Kentucky instead of in Norman, where he's committed to watch Alabama come play. So that kind of gives you an idea of how eager some Oklahoma commits and fans are to watch this football game. It's going to be interesting, right? I don't know if Oklahoma will be bowl eligible after this week. I don't know if it'll necessarily matter. I don't know if this will be last game for Jackson Arnold as an Oklahoma Sooner, especially in Norman, right? So a lot of underlying storylines that we'll look back in a month or two on and say, yeah, we knew against Alabama what the actual situation was. I think there's a lot of, speculation going on in Norman right now. But to the game itself, Oklahoma's a good defense. They have a bad offense. I think right now the weaknesses of Alabama maybe is in that secondary. I don't know if that necessarily matches up well at all for Oklahoma. I like Jalen Milroe to be able to create, extend, and elude some of those Oklahoma defenders. But it's going to be Ryan Williams for me that really separates and creates the big explosive plays. If they're able to get him the rock, as they have been in big games previously this year, they'll have no issues finding ways to get on top and win in Norman. That's something I'm thinking it's going to be a 17, 20-point victory for Alabama, just because Oklahoma's offense against competent defenses, they've just not looked good at all this year.
Against competent defenses, they look incompetent.
Absolutely.
Rod, what do you think about this game?
Yeah, I mean, I think Oklahoma's defense, I still like it. I think their defense is still one of the best in the country. That offense is abysmal. It has improved since they made another change at QB, but it's still a bad offense overall. And I'm worried about the risk factor, at least of Jackson Arnold. And you go look at the turnover margin. I believe Alabama is 4th in the country in turnover margin. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they're 2nd in takeaways. They're one of the only teams that's ahead of Texas in takeaways. That's a bad matchup for an Oklahoma offense that at times can be dysfunctional, just downright dysfunctional. So I think that ends up being the difference. I think ultimately Alabama takes better care of the football. Turnover margins are a big difference in the game.
I want to see if this big Alabama offensive line can actually run the football right at Oklahoma. Because this would be one of those games where if anybody's going to be able to do it with those two big running back or two really good running backs Alabama has, as well as a running quarterback, they will be the ones that are able to do it. To your point, Rod, about the takeaways for Alabama and the giveaways for OU, Jackson Arnold, I mean, what he did last week against Missouri is, I mean, it's crazy to me.
Exactly.
He literally gave the game away.
He seems cursed. He seems cursed. I'm telling you,
he's cursed or just doesn't protect the football at all. Like, I mean, I don't know what to say, but to your point, guys, OU, they got to win one of the last 2 games to get qualified for a bowl. Right now, they will be a prohibitive underdog in both of those contests. Man. All right, let's get going down to Auburn, Alabama, and talk about the folks in Jordan-Hare Stadium for the Auburn Tigers. They host Texas A&M. Texas A&M tied with Texas atop the SEC right now. The Aggies are only 2.5-point favorites over Auburn, who is winless in SEC play at home this year. Winless at home. How are they only 2.5-point favorites? Is this one of those where maybe the gods of gambling just know more than the rest of us? Because it sure feels that way, Rod.
I think it's a matchup thing. First of all, you got to play at Auburn. That's always a problem. Night game, all right? Night game. That's always freaky stuff happens, SEC night games. And the Auburn defense is actually pretty stingy against the run. You go look at, I think that is the offensive calling card for the Aggies right now is their run game. Auburn allows just 3.9 yards per carry, 7th fewest in the country. If you go look at their rush defense and allowing less than a yard before contact per carry. So they're stingy, and that is the identity of that offense for the Aggies. So I just wanted to thinking, oh man, maybe it's just a bad matchup for the Aggies, and it'll be tough sledding for them to move the football consistently, make plays offensively. But I think ultimately I'll give it to the Aggie defense here. I think the Aggie defense makes enough plays. I like that defensive line of theirs. It's going to be a problem for Texas too, but I think it's going to be a problem for Auburn. I'll take the Aggies to hold up their end of the bargain. So the Texas A&M game will be potentially the biggest in the history of the rivalry. I'll say the Aggies don't Aggie it up. I'll say outside of that.
Hey, this is great, Rod. I'm glad you picked the Aggies because you know what that means? It's going to be wrong. Every time you pick them, it goes the other way. CJ, what do you think, buddy?
Everybody wants to play night games until they have to go on the road, right? We heard it with A&M until against South Carolina. We saw what happened under the lights there. We are hearing it again right now whenever you have to go to Auburn. Listen, Jordan-Hare's not an easy place to play. Everybody knows that, especially when they're fighting for bowl eligibility. They're fighting for hopes of what could be the remaining of their season. Oh, and you get to play a top 15 team and maybe play spoiler. I think that stadium is going to be pretty loud, pretty pretty tough to play in. Rod hit the nail on the head. I mean, they're top 10 in rush yards, yards allowed per rush defensively. That's kind of A&M's MO with Marcel Reed. You force him to throw the football, you're going to be in for a long day. And especially A&M's been bit again at the wide receiver position with another injury. Worth mentioning there that, hey, they're going to be pretty shorthanded all the way around their playmaking core whenever they play Texas in a week from now. So I think that's going to be the interesting factor. But can Peyton Thorne and Auburn muster up enough big plays offensively? That's my big question. It is kind of a revenge game, if you will, for Cam Coleman, who was previously committed to Texas A&M. I know A&M fans don't like seeing him succeed, so maybe there's a trick play or an added emphasis to get the five-star freshman the rock early in that game. We'll see, but I'm with you, Rod. I think A&M just has too much talent defensively to walk on the road and stumble.
Here's my question. How is the over 46.5?
I don't know.
Where are the points coming?
I know. I don't know who's going to win the game. I would imagine, like y'all, I would take A&M. But, 40, I mean, I would be picking this game like 24-12 or something in favor of A&M, not 35 or, you know what I mean? I don't see either team score or both teams scoring in the 20s. I'll put it that way.
Like first to 17.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy, but all right, A&M likely to win is what we all think. And, the points, if this game were on a neutral field, I guess it would be a 5.5-point favorite for A&M. So we'd have to consider that. But that's where those are at. A couple other games in the SEC worth mentioning, guys. Missouri goes to Mississippi State after the narrow loss last week to South Carolina. Brady Cook expected to go again for the Tigers. We'll see. That starts at around 3:15. That'll be on the SEC network while Texas is playing. Vandy goes to LSU.
Ooh.
LSU lost 3 in a row, guys. That's the 6:45 game on the SEC network. LSU, this is crazy, only favored by 8. What was this game? What would this line have been preseason? Like 24?
24.
Something like that. Yeah. CJ, what do you think about those two games just real quick?
Yeah, real quick. Can LSU stop the quarterback run? Because we've not seen that be the case at all this year, whether it be Marcel Reed, whether it be Jalen Milroe a few weeks ago. Listen, if Diego Pavia and that Vanderbilt offense can go ahead and continue doing that 4 yards in a cloud of dust every single rush attempt, that's going to be a long night for the LSU Tigers. And, hey, in a world in which NIL and this and that, the transfer portal will take over all the negative headlines. Imagine a season where Vanderbilt beats both Alabama and LSU.
Dang.
Sign me up.
All right. Other SEC games, a bunch of nobodies. Georgia, UMass. Tennessee plays UTEP. South Carolina hosts Wofford. Tell me where that's located. Arkansas plays Louisiana Tech. Arkansas, by the way, a 22-point favorite against Louisiana Tech. All right, let's go now outside the SEC, guys, and talk a little bit about the Ohio State-Indiana game. That is the only big game for this weekend, in my opinion, that we need to really worry about. Ohio State hosts Indiana. The Buckeyes favored by 13.5. It's an 11 o'clock game on Fox. I'll be watching that and the Florida Ole Miss game kind of simultaneously at the tailgate here in an hour. So what are y'all's thoughts on that game, in y'all's opinion?
Ooh, the Cinderella story, right? Indiana's the Cinderella story. But, man, it may come to an end versus Ohio State. Ohio State definitely will be their biggest test. Ohio State's got NFL players everywhere in their secondary. All the guys on their defensive line are probably going to end up draft picks in the NFL draft. And then you got what Kurt Cignetti's built on the other side with a lot of guys who transferred from lower levels. It is a fascinating, really compelling matchup. I think it'll come down to, can Indiana stop the Ohio State run game? And if they can they force Will Howard into predictable passing situations? Because if you do, then we've seen Will Howard, and we know both sides of Will Howard, right? We know Will spill the peel Howard and Will the thrill Howard. He can be both. And if you want to see Will spill the peel Howard, you got to put him in passing situations and you got to confuse him. Indiana can do this now. Indiana's got one of the best pass rushers in the country. Now, it has not been up against an Ohio State. They got at least 8 guys on their roster, guys, with at least 10 pressures. 8. So they get after you from a lot of different ways. Nobody's better than what's the stud? Mikael Kamara. He's a beast. He's going to play on Sundays. And the Ohio State, even though they've adjusted it, remember they had some offensive line issues early in the season. Had back-to-back left tackle, starting left tackle, and the backup go down. They've since kind of been able to stabilize things. But if Indiana can put that stud Kamara on whoever the third string or backup offensive lineman they end up trying to put up there, that could end up being a game-wrecking situation. But Ohio State can stay out of that if they just stay out of predictable passing situations and third and long situations if they run the ball effectively. So it comes down to, can Indiana stop the run game of a powerhouse like Ohio State? I'm not sure they can. That's what I'm not sure about.
What do you think, CJ?
Hey, Rod, you mentioned offensive line issues for Ohio State. They just lost their starting center, Seth McLaughlin, who transferred over from Alabama. One of the top centers in all the country tore his Achilles in practice. Very unfortunate. Why is that significant? Indiana has one of the better nose tackles in all of the Big Ten with CJ West. That's going to be an issue. You mentioned Kamara, D'Angelo Pons on the backside as well. I love Indiana. For folks that have been following this football season, and I've been very vocal on Twitter about it and on the message board. Yeah. I've been a big fan of Indiana this year. I think Curtis Rourke's the most underrated quarterback in all the country. He makes NFL throws on a regular basis, especially the back shoulder fades. Look for that to be a big way that they move the rock. 13 points is too many. I don't care where the game's played. Indiana is going to be a close game against Ohio State. And again, let's think about it. It's Will Howard in a big game. Come on. What did we see last time? He slid the run out the clock. I like Indiana to cover in this game.
Boom. Boom. CJ has
CJ's got me wanting to watch that game today.
They're good, man.
No, CJ has been on it since week 2. He's been talking about Indiana. I will vouch for that. He's been on that bandwagon before everybody else was.
Now I've got Indiana 75-1 to win the Big Ten at my bookie. So place that before the year. Let me say that.
All right, guys, that's gonna do it for today. I hope everybody has a travel safe to the game, or if you're watching at home. Enjoy yourself today. 11 o'clock 2:30 Longhorns take on Kentucky on ABC. That'll do it. Thanks again to our friends over at MyBookie for their sponsorship. This has been the Saturday Conversation for Rod Babers, CJ Vogel. I'm Bobby Burton. You guys have a good day today. Let's bring home a victory. Hook 'em.
Hook 'em.